Joined by international relations expert, Professor Chris Isike via video link. Prof, a very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the late edition.
Good evening, Simpiwe. Thank you for having me.
Now, this bill has passed its first hurdle in the United States House Foreign Affairs Committee. Could you perhaps unpack what this legislation seeks to achieve and why it was introduced at this particular time?
Well, look, like you said, the whole essence of the bill is to prepare grounds for President Trump, to take, action against South Africa. He must decide after signing it into law and declare publicly whether South Africa has taken foreign policy actions that undermine U.S. National security interests, especially look at South Africa's alignment with China, Russia, or the support for Hamas that they claim in the bill. So that's what they're driving at, and it's not really new. It's something that this particular House of Representative member Ronnie Jackson has been pursuing for a while. In the last dispensation, he had bipartisan support in that it was co-sponsored with a Democrat. In this case, it's not with a Democrat but a fellow Republican. And in terms of why now, this was still in April. And I think that the White House, President Trump, has a different view of South Africa, different interests and different targets from the legislators, the House of Reps and even the Senate. They have different views about Russia, for example. President Trump may not necessarily sanction South Africa for cozying up to Russia because he himself does the same. He admires Putin. But the House of Representative members or the Senator, including the current Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, strongly opposes South Africa's relationship with Russia. So there are different reasons for doing this at this point in time. But I think it aligns with the president's, dislike for South Africa, if you can call it that.
In fact, we've just seen Congressman Ronnie Jackson arguing that South Africa is siding with U.S. adversaries like China, Russia and Iran. From your perspective, Prof, how valid are these concerns in the context of South Africa's foreign policy stance?
Look, like Congressman Mick said, people may not always agree with some of the actions South Africa has taken, in the past. But like you said, these issues are usually ventilated using diplomatic channels and grounded out eventually. So it's actually nonsensical for the U.S. to be talking now about accountability, corruption, and human rights when they themselves are sponsoring, funding human rights abuses in Gaza.
And if this legislation, for argument's sake, ultimately becomes law, what practical implications could it have for South Africa's government, the ANC in particular, and the bilateral relations with the United States?
Well, for one, it will only worsen, the diplomatic relations between both countries, which is, deteriorated in the last couple of months, especially since Trump came back. And it will also, I think it is also designed to signal to other global south countries, especially those that align with China, Russia, BRICS, to say, look, we can come at you, so you better back off. So I think that's the kind of message they are trying to send. We'll wait to see who and what criteria will be used to identify ANC members for what reason, but essentially it will just be travel bans against them and their family members, and freezing their accounts if they have any in West generally.
And I see that this bill is framed around potential sanctions. So I'm quite keen to know, Prof, what forms these sanctions could take and how damaging could they be to South Africa economically and diplomatically?
Well, if they impose sanctions, they could target, South African access to markets, which they've already started targeting with the, unilateral 30% tariffs that they just imposed, even though there is a trade deal that South Africa has offered, and these are being discussed. It will also intensify, further strain the relationship between South Africa and the US. Like I said, there are a lot of issues that are at play. And so essentially it will damage South Africa economically. I don't think right now it will damage South Africa diplomatically, because I think the world knows that we're dealing with someone that uses what they call the madman theory in the White House, to foreign policy. So it's not new. South Africa is not the only recipient of this madness. A lot of countries are also being targeted for this. So on that stance, South Africa will not be soiled diplomatically, except to say if the access to markets in the US are closed, there are opportunities to derail its access to the West, can affect it.
Now, Prof, do you think this signals a broader shift in how the United States intends to sort of engage with African countries perceived to be leaning towards BRICS partners?
Yes, I would think so, because you will recall that he had a summit recently with a few countries, 5 countries in Africa. None of the big players were there. And I think that came on the back of the BRICS summit that was held in Brazil. I think he's trying to send a message. And of course, there has also been talks of the mail that South Africa and Nigeria, for example, refused to accept some of the deplorables, the criminal elements that they want to deport to third countries, for on behalf of the US. So there are a lot of things that, are at play. The Trump administration's approach to foreign policy is the use of force, very expansionist and transactional. All of these are coming to play. So if you don't play ball, I will just hit you where I think it will hurt you. And that's what the kind of foreign policy we are seeing. And like you said, it does mark a shift from how US, plays, the game of international politics.
Yeah. Prof, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for sharing your analysis and your thoughts with us. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Well, this development certainly tells us a lot about the geopolitical contestation between the West, in particular the United States, and the BRICS nations, and where South Africa fits in within this increasingly polarized global order, and how, of course, South Africa should strategically navigate these tensions to safeguard its national interest while maintaining its global partnerships. That was international relations expert, Professor Chris Isike, really helping us make sense of these developments.